Hey guys, it's Drummond. So I decided today I would bring someone onto my channel that knows a little bit more about the topic we're going to talk about today. This is my friend Jason.
Hey everybody.
We've actually known each other for a couple years now, and today's topic is pretty much just everything about HIV, AIDS, STDs, STIs, whatever they're called now. I know that you're a lot more versed and educated in this subject than I am, and I wanted to give it a good run for its money because I think it's a very important topic to talk about.
Okay.
So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is getting tested and why it's important.
Okay. All right. So yeah, getting tested is a really good thing for just about anybody to do. I say if you're sexually active, why not get tested? At least once a year is what the CDC recommends for individuals of a certain age group who are sexually active. If you have higher risk, you might want to get tested a little more regularly than that, but at least once a year.
I agree, definitely. What about when it comes to, I feel like a lot of people don't get tested because they're scared about going to these places.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I think fear is probably like the one thing that keeps everybody from maybe not going immediately or not going at all. And I always say that the most important thing is not what your results are. The most important thing is knowing your results. So I tell everybody, it's okay to be scared, but don't be so scared to the point that you don't get tested, because that's just silly.
Yeah, I would say the first time I ended up getting tested, I was scared to death. Like I was shaking just because the first time I went, I was in a committed relationship. I had made the decision not to use condoms because we'd been in a relationship for several years.
Yeah.
It wasn't until like I found out that he had cheated on me and that he was cheating on me without using condoms that now I'm at risk of having something.
Yep.
So I did put it off. I was scared to death of going.
Absolutely.
And when I was sitting there, I was scared to death just because I know that it's a complete life-changing event if you find out that you're positive.
Well, and I think that's like a really important thing, is that it's just a life changer, or I say like it tweaks your life a little bit, it doesn't end it. So a lot of people see a diagnosis of HIV or any other STI or STD for that matter to be, you know, the end of your life completely. And it doesn't have to be. We live in a day and age now where we have so many resources, where we have so much knowledge, we've come so far that we can be scared, but it's just going to tweak our life. It's not going to end it.
That's actually a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that you would say that would be preventative so that you're safe and you can go out there and do what you want to do without being scared to death of getting tested and finding the results?
Yeah. Well, I will say that probably anybody's going to be nervous to get tested. I still get nervous when I get tested, and I have a similar story to yours. That's what got me into this field. And I was literally like balled up in the chair while my test was running. I was bawling my eyes out. I thought my life was over. And then it was actually, like, I remember it like yesterday, 12 minutes into my 20-minute rapid test, all of a sudden it was like a light bulb went off, and I sat up and I looked at the person who was running the test and I said, "It's gonna be okay." And he was like, "Are you okay? Like, do I need to get somebody?" I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, this is it. And I knew in that moment that I was going through that scared, you know, troubled part of this adventure, really, that I didn't want to be on. That I understood then what it was to be terrified, thinking my life was over. So I know that kind of jumped from the question you asked originally, but I think it's really important to know that even if you're in this field, you can still be nervous. So the first thing I would say is everybody's going to be nervous to some degree when they're getting tested. And that's okay. It really is okay. But I would say if we were looking to live a healthier, lower risk life to where we could be less fearful when we get tested, there are a couple of things we can definitely do. The first thing is, obviously, like you said, use condoms or some sort of barrier method if you can. So when we're talking about sex, a lot of people have all different types of sex and all different types of places with all different types of people. And I always say my job ain't to judge you on what you do or what you like to do. That's fine. Maybe I'll learn something. Okay. My job is just to figure out how can we do that to lower your risk. And condoms or a barrier method, so like a dental dam or an internal condom or something like that, that can really help lower the risk of things like HIV, other STIs, pregnancy, if that's your thing. And so those are all things that maybe not everybody wants to have. And so a condom or a barrier method is super, super important. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is get tested regularly. So the more you do something, the more routine it becomes, and you start to feel like, oh, all right, like this isn't this weird thing that I'm only doing because I think I might have gotten something. A lot of times we wait until we're like, there's an itch, or oh my gosh, like I'm burning, or you know, something's going on, I think I already have something. And then all of a sudden we associate getting tested with this bad thing, you know, like, oh, I made a mistake, or oh, I heard some bad news. And so I think if we get tested regularly, like I said, at least once a year, maybe twice, some people do 3 or 4 times a year. If you do it routinely, you get used to being in there. If you go to the same place, you're gonna see the same providers, and you know, they're gonna kind of get to know you, and so it's gonna be kind of fun.
It's kind of like an annual checkup for your health in general.
Yeah.
Just one extra step there.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people, when they go for an annual physical, they'll just say, hey, can you throw on, you know, like an STI panel? There you go. That's the easiest way to do it. It really is. And then I'll say too, the third thing that I would always say to make it easier is something that we all do, is just talk and communicate. So I always say that if you talk to your partners about this stuff, you might find out that they have the same fear that you do. Or you might find out that they already know that they have something, or they've had something in the past, and they just were a little nervous to tell you because they didn't know how you'd react. If you're nervous about something, or if you have questions, talk to your partners about it. It's super, super important to bring that up. And it's not something you only have to do with someone you first meet. It can be an ongoing conversation too. So I think talking to your partner is really important. And also like talking to your doctor or whoever's doing your test. Be open with them. If you say, I have this kind of sex with this kind of person, okay, now we know we need to do this kind of test to go with it. So I think communication and just talking to each other is the epitome of what we need to do to increase awareness and to make it less scary to know this stuff.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to conversation, it's important to bring stuff like that up. I feel like a lot of people are definitely embarrassed to ask that type of question. I know, like, every single time I've been in a relationship, that's something that I'm just like, oh my gosh, they're gonna hate me, but I'm gonna have to ask because I'm kind of a germaphobe in general, and that's not just with STIs and stuff like that, it's with everything. It's like if someone with a really gross hand touches me, like I have to wash. It's like when I'm talking to someone and I think it's going to lead to that, I'm just like, okay, how do I bring this up? Like, what's a great way to just bring it up without offending someone?
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the things is that we automatically assume, like, I'm going to offend you if I ask you this question or that question. But there are so many questions we could ask and so many topics we could breach with somebody. And I always say, if you're going to be that close with somebody physically, be that close with them verbally too. Yeah. Like, it's all going to be out on the table in a matter of minutes anyway. So, like, why don't you go ahead and just start it by verbalizing, you know, what's on your mind. If the whole time you're thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder if, what about, you're going to be distracted anyway. So it's not going to be good for nobody. But, you know, what I found is like one way to easily breach the topic of testing, for example, is just to say, hey, I got tested a couple of months ago. That was a kind of a cool experience. Have you been tested? Or when's the last time that you got tested? Or if you kind of have the heads up that maybe things are going down that path, you could even make it a date. Which I know a lot of people are like, a date to go get tested? What are you talking about? I'm like, no, this will be good. Because you can go together, you can get tested together, and if you need someone there to kind of hold your hand and be supportive, you've got somebody there. Yeah. And not only that, but then in 20 minutes or 7 days or a couple of hours, whenever you get your results back, then you got somebody there to celebrate with you too. So, and I'm just talking about going to go get ice cream. I don't know what you're talking about. But I think making it, just making it something that's everyday conversation, it really just impacts the whole tone. And you don't feel so shameful or embarrassed. The other thing I want to say too is like when it comes to condoms, a lot of people they're afraid to breach that topic because they're like, they're gonna think I don't trust them, you know. And that's like the very first thing when you say, oh, do you have one, or you need to put one on, or hold on, let me put one on. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, do they think that I think that they got something, you know, or do they think that I think that blah blah blah? No, not at all. You know, I think that saying, hey, let's use a condom is a great way, again, to kind of start that. And what I found is that if somebody adamantly says, I'm not using a condom with you, then guess what? You ain't getting anything of what I got to give, because that's one of my things, you know? So if you set a standard for yourself, it's kind of a good way to weed out the people that don't match with, you know, they're not compatible with you. Because if that's something that you want to do, have no shame in telling them that that's something you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. Where would you say someone could go get tested? I know when it comes to like younger people, a lot of them are still on their parents' insurance.
Yep.
I know that that's something that they don't really want to. I know a lot of people don't want to just be like, hey, mom and dad, I'm having sex.
Yeah,
and
right.
For gay people in general, and I know if they're still in the closet and they're sexually active, it's kind of embarrassing. They don't want to go into public places where they're just like throwing it out there.
Yeah.
So where would you say are good places for people?
There are so many options of where to get tested, how to get tested. I will say a lot of your resources are going to depend on where you're at. So if you're in, you know, the middle of nowhere, you know, maybe your resources will be a little bit different than if you're in New York City, for example. But there's always resources and there's always a way to get testing somewhere. So a lot of times your local health department will offer tests. Some even offer them without having to have insurance, without having to pay, without having to, you know, give any information that your parents might find out, or, you know, anything like that. So I always say if you have questions, the first place you could go is your local health department, because they've got all the resources handy. A lot of places, obviously doctors' offices, you know, offer these tests. So if you do have the ability to use your insurance, or you know, you have that communication line, any primary care provider, any sort of doctor's office can run these tests. And then if you don't want to go there, or you can't go there, there are a lot of times places like LGBT centers, or what we call AIDS service organizations, or places like that. And a lot of times they'll offer what's called rapid testing. And for HIV, that means you could have results, or preliminary results, in as fast as 60 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Some, you know, just about 10 or 15 minutes, some 20 minutes. And a lot of times those services are completely free. And you don't have to have any sort of, you know, like insurance or payment method, because they're free.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
One thing I actually ran across was, I was on Facebook just scrolling through my news feed, and actually the Virginia State Health Department popped up and they're like, hey, you can get a free test sent to your home, which I feel like that's something that kind of helps people out a little bit who are a little bit nervous about going into public places.
Yep.
Because even if people don't judge in those centers, we have judgment for ourselves, and we will place judgment on other people, and they're like, oh, they're going to judge us. It's just like going to the gym. You feel like people are judging you, and they're really just there to help you out, or just doing their own thing as well. So I actually received one in the mail, which was pretty cool. Haven't done it yet because my boyfriend and I want to do one together, and he just ordered his. So we're going to kind of make it a thing, which is going to be interesting.
Like a date night.
Exactly. Let's watch a movie and have some popcorn after our date and just wait for it to come out.
There you go. Yeah. No, I think that's great. And it actually just so happens that I have one of these tests sitting right over here. So I just, if it's okay, I just want to show everybody what this looks like. So I'm going to block out my address. But if you live in Virginia, you're right. Virginia's got a program where you can order a test kit. And this is how it comes in the mail. Just, hopefully yours came looking like this. Yep. Okay. So, and I want to show you what the test kit looks like. So, when you open it up, It's like Christmas. Great.
Yeah, they really just put it in a package so you can't, like other people, if it's sitting on your porch or it's in your mailbox, that no one can really tell what it is. So you can actually do it anonymously and in the private of your own home.
Great. So this is what it looks like when you open it. It's just this little test kit here. It's by OraQuick, and one thing I always like to point out is that Virginia residents have the option to get these delivered to their home. Anybody in America can go to their nearest pharmacy and find these. Okay. So Walgreens, CVS, I mean all kinds of places. If they've got a pharmacy, you'll find these. They typically range about $35 to $45, so we see them sitting at about $39.99. But that's a really great option because you can take this test, you can bring it home, you can do it with your partner or any partners that you have, or just by yourself. And then in 20 minutes you have preliminary results. So that's what this is. Okay. It's really, really great.
So with that, is it like accurate? Like how accurate would you say?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question to ask, and I like how you asked it because everybody says that. They're like, wait, I can buy this, I can do it at home, all I have to do is put it in my mouth and I can trust it? Yes, you can totally trust it. Okay. Absolutely. So there are a lot of, like I said, the rapid testing programs, and this is the exact same test that organizations all across the country are using every single day. The accuracy and the sensitivity is spot on. It's great. Now you do have to take into effect that if you're infected or you're exposed on, let's say, like Saturday night, Monday morning is going to be a little too fast. And maybe the next week is probably going to be a little too fast. So depending on which test your provider is using, there's going to be a different, what we call a window period of how long we have to wait before our body shows that we're positive. So basically what happens is these tests look for antibodies or antigens. An antigen is a marker for the virus itself that we can pick up. An antibody is your body's response, kind of like the antibodies are like soldiers. So if your body says I'm being infected, I've got to make these soldiers to fight off this infection. The antibodies are what those soldiers are. Okay. But it takes a little bit of time to mobilize them to get them to the point where we can pick it up. But depending on the test, you're looking at just waiting, like 2 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on how your body reacts. But these are awesome. They're super simple to use. You literally stick it up in your mouth and just go once across the top, once across the bottom. Basically, that's it. And then you sit it in a tube. You pop it in this cute little stand. It comes like this, and then you just wait 20 minutes and you're done. And it shows you exactly how to determine if it's a preliminary positive or a non-reactive. So at-home test kits are really, really, really great for anybody who doesn't want to go into a clinical setting. One thing I do always like to point out though is that a lot of times when you get these, there'll be this number on it. And there's always going to be a number somewhere in these test kits. In case you have a reactive test, you have someone to call. And I always tell everybody, if you know me or you have my phone number and one of these comes back reactive, you can call me. So.
Perfect person to call.
Yeah.
So with that one's only for HIV, so it would only pick up HIV. It's not going to say positive if you got something that's less invasive, like if it's a syphilis or anything like that.
Correct, yeah. So these tests are made specifically for HIV. And every single infection has a different type of test we have to run. So we have to run specific tests for things like HIV, syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, hepatitis C, hepatitis B. They all have a very different test. So if you go to your provider and you ask for STI testing,
they'll do the whole lineup.
Usually, but make sure you tell them, I want everything. And if you don't do blood and urine, you're not getting everything. Okay. So, and on that note, actually, if you want to talk about gonorrhea and chlamydia too.
Sure.
Okay, all right. So, I'm saying, a lot of people don't know that there are certain infections that have to be tested wherever you're having sex. So, like gonorrhea and chlamydia, for example, you can pee in a cup, and that only tests for gonorrhea and chlamydia there, in your urethra. Okay. If you're having receptive anal intercourse, or if you're bottoming, you need to have a swab done there too. And that'll test for gonorrhea and chlamydia. If you've ever had oral sex, you need to do it in your throat too.
Oh, wow.
Because you can have gonorrhea or chlamydia in your throat or your rectum, and they won't test positive through a urine sample. So there are all kinds of crazy things that we can have in crazy places. And my thing is, if you've ever had anything sticking in any hole anywhere, get it tested.
That's actually really good information,
Yeah.
because like I wouldn't have even thought about that. I guess that's why they ask all those questions when you go get tested.
Yeah.
Because I remember going and I was like, oh my gosh, these people are asking everything about how I do it. And I'm like, this is really embarrassing to talk about. Because like usually it's older people. Like the person that I went and got tested with, she was an older lady. And I was just like, yeah, I've done that. Have you done this? Yeah, I've done that too.
Yeah.
So that makes sense now. I didn't know that.
And I think going in there and having to answer yes to like every question they ask, you're like, oh my gosh, yes. But really, they are asking those questions because there might be other things that you could or should be tested for that you don't know. And I'll tell you just from my observation, some of those old ladies that you go to and talk to, you ain't got to worry about them. So they are older, which means they've heard a lot more and they've probably done a lot more. And they're not answering those questions, but you might be surprised.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is symptoms. So I actually recently had a freak out because I had a sore throat that I'd never experienced before in my life. It lasted for about 2 weeks. It was right after I got back from California. At first I was just like, okay, changing climate. Yeah, that makes sense. Then I went camping and jumped in cold water, which was, of course, a stupid idea. So I was like, that's why it's lasting so long. But then I was actually at work and someone was like, oh, that sounds like an STI. And I instantly just started like panicking. So like when you start like Googling like symptoms and then you start seeing things, like you really freak out. Like you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about some of the symptoms that could kind of trigger you going, hey, maybe I should go get tested.
Sure. Well, like we talked about earlier, we're going to be getting tested regularly anyway, regardless of symptoms. So it's all right. It's okay. But if you do happen to experience something out of the ordinary, it's always good to pay attention to that stuff. You know your body, and you also know your risks. So, you know, if somebody were to say, oh my gosh, Jason, like, I've got this sore throat, but I haven't had sex in 14 and a half years, then I'd be like, well, maybe it's just allergies. You know, so, you know, it's always good to think about your activities, so you know your risks, but you also know if something's not right, so pay attention to that. The thing with STIs is that all of them could have symptoms, or they could not have symptoms. So a lot of people become infected with any number of infections. So HIV, syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, trich, hepatitis C, hepatitis B. I mean, we can go on and on. So they might have an infection, but they have no signs or symptoms whatsoever. That's why getting tested regularly is really important, because you may be what we call asymptomatic. If you're someone who has symptoms, they might manifest a little bit differently. So with HIV, some people experience a really intense flu. And it's kind of, you know, just sudden onset. They're not sure what brought it on. I always say just be mindful that, you know, like if it is flu season, some people are going to get the flu, and it's seriously just the flu.
Don't freak out.
Don't freak out. But again, know your risks. Yeah. So if you are having, you know, sex with somebody, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask them, and then they say, oh yes, they're positive, and you're having this crazy flu-like symptom, maybe go get tested. That could be what we call seroconversion, which is basically when your body is realizing it's become positive and it's waging this war inside to try to stay healthy. Other things like chlamydia in guys, for example, a lot of times you're not going to have signs or symptoms for chlamydia whatsoever. So you could maybe have a little itch, maybe not. And for a lot of guys, they fall into that maybe not category. Things like gonorrhea, you're usually going to have a little bit of a drippage or a drainage or some oozing or goozing. It might burn when you pee a little bit. But again, you can have nothing. And when you were talking about your throat, sometimes if you have gonorrhea or chlamydia in your throat, it can present as like a sore throat. And so it's always just important to look for those signs or symptoms. Now, I'll say, you also said that you Googled. Don't Google anything. Do not. If you can put these little like flashy X's coming up, don't do it.
Yeah. So when it came to it, I was just like, there's so many different things like online. It was like, don't do this. It'll do this, and you don't know what you're supposed to do. And some of the sites look really official, and you can't have two official sites saying completely different things.
I'll tell you, if you do have to look online, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, CDC. That is a good place to go, and probably the only place that I would suggest going if you're just browsing for signs and symptoms, or you want to, learn some stuff. There are plenty of other reputable sites, and I can even give you a couple if you want, or if anybody here wants any. But the CDC is a great place to start because they are the top and the bottom and the left and the right of everything about sexual health and any other disease for that matter. But yeah, you can find a lot of stuff on Google. The best thing to do is just to call your doctor or to call your health department, or just flat out go get tested. But Googling can be our best friend or our worst enemy. And a lot of times, like you found out, it's our worst enemy.
Yeah. It'll give you a heart attack. And you're sitting there like, oh,
it will. And then not only do you have this oozing and goozing to worry about, but you're having a heart attack at the same time. So now you've got like all of these things happening.
Multiple symptoms here. Yeah. My sister was actually, she didn't know that women were at risk of it as well, but when she became pregnant, they actually ran tests for her.
Yep.
And she was like, well, I know I'm good because I had to get tested when I was pregnant. And I was like, that's good. And she's like, I don't understand why I would have to get tested though, because it's not like I'm having sex with a gay guy. And I'm like, thanks, but it's not just gay guys that got it.
It's not. It can happen to anybody. And actually, when we're talking about rates of STIs, the CDC actually just released their findings for the last period of time when they were looking, and we are seeing an increase in all the STIs across all groups of people. So it's really important to remember you don't have to be gay, and you don't have to be, a lot of people say like, oh, I'm not a slut, or I'm not a whore, so I'm fine. Well, guess what? It only takes one person one time, and sometimes we don't even know that we're infected because we're asymptomatic. And if I'm not pointing at you like you haven't, sorry.
We're like him over here.
But seriously, we could be asymptomatic, or we could be newly infected and not know that we're transmitting this infection. And all it takes is one time, and we could have it. And if we don't get this infection treated, we're gonna have it forever. So it can totally be anybody. And with women, when they become pregnant, first trimester and third trimester, most of the time they're going to do a whole line of tests. And the reason why is because any of these STIs can truly impact the pregnancy, and a lot of times can cause the child to die, whether it be right before birth, right after birth. And so we want to keep mom healthy and the baby healthy. So a lot of times, they'll say, why do I have to get tested? It's just a standard thing to do to make sure everybody is healthy and happy.
We want the baby coming out healthy.
Yes.
It's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing I figured we could talk about is once you figure out that you are HIV positive, what type of life changes are you going to see, and how important it is to share with people in your life? Because I feel like it's a game changer. Especially for people who aren't well educated on it. I feel like it's hard enough coming out to your family and being like, hey, I'm gay. I feel like tagging on top of that, hey, I'm also HIV positive, I feel like has just as much of a negative stigma as being gay does. And I feel like people need to be educated well enough to where they can kind of describe it to their friends and family so their doesn't treat them like there's some just disease.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think that's the sad truth is like a lot of times when somebody is diagnosed as HIV positive, all of a sudden it's like nothing else matters about them, and it's just that diagnosis. And I tell everybody, just because you have HIV does not mean that you are only HIV. It means that you are a person living with HIV. And it can be really hard sometimes to get over that, that hurdle of telling people, or even coming to terms for yourself. And I tell people all the time, that's okay. It's all right if you feel like you get depressed, or you get, confused, or you get upset. That's all right. It's totally okay. Because for a lot of people, like you said, it is a game changer. It's not a life ender, it's just a life tweaker. It's gonna tweak a couple things. So you're gonna have to shift a couple of things, but it's something that's totally manageable. It's something that, there are other people in the world that have HIV. So you definitely should know, and I hope that everybody knows that you're not alone. If you are diagnosed with HIV, you're not alone. It may feel like it some days, but you're not. And one of the cool things is that with there being so many people who are HIV positive now, is that there's always some sort of support group, whether it be online, through social media, in person. There's always going to be somebody willing to listen. I'll listen if you need to. Just saying again.
Pointing it out.
Yeah, right? But there's always somebody who's going to listen. And I think there are some days when that's just what you need. Like we've all been through those times where we're just down and out, and all we need is somebody to listen. Or all we need is to know that somebody else has gone through this like we're going through it. So yeah, HIV is not a life ender, it's just a little bit of a changer. A lot of people think that they're gonna like have to live in a hospital for like the 4 months they're gonna stay alive. The truth is, you're gonna stay alive a lot longer than 4 months, and you're not gonna be in the doctor's office as much as you think. A lot of times you go for like that appointment when you're first diagnosed, and then pretty soon thereafter you start taking meds. And a lot of people say, I've heard about those medications, it's like 19 3/4 pills 14 times a day. Not anymore. So back in the day, the medicine used to be worse than the virus was. Now we're at a point where you're taking 1, 2, maybe 3 pills once or twice a day. So it's not going to kill you to take meds. In fact, it's going to help you stay alive. So make sure you stay on your meds if you're diagnosed with HIV. So that's also really important, because a lot of people immediately say, how long do I have to live? You can live as long as you want to live. If you do what you're supposed to do, take your meds, go to your appointments, be healthy, get your body on track, you're going to do okay.
A lot of times it seems like my friends that have found out that they're HIV positive, you almost see like a huge change in, they almost look healthier because they change their diet, because the doctors tell them that it's important. They start working out a lot more. So it almost looks like once they came out and they were just like, hey, I'm HIV positive, it's like, boom, they're like a completely different person.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard to see someone like take that step, but a lot of times I see like the downward like fall where they're upset about it, but then I feel like they probably educate themselves and start making healthier life choices, and that and all makes them a lot happier and healthier too.
And the education is so important, because I think a lot of times like our fear comes from not knowing. The stigma comes from not knowing. All of that stuff, it comes from not knowing. So if we educate ourselves, whether it be before, during, or after we're diagnosed, we're gonna have a better handle of what's actually happening. And I think a lot of times when someone says, you have HIV, our first thought is like, what? And then the world comes crashing down. But if we think about like the pillars of strength in life are education. So it's learning, it's everything that we learn builds a support in our life. So if we look at HIV and we say, okay, let's learn about how do we contract this. Let's learn about what medications there are. Let's learn about the life expectancy, or let's learn about how we can't give this or get this. Those things, they give us more support. So when we are diagnosed, we know a little bit more. Or when someone that's close to us is diagnosed, we know how to support them too. So I think you're so right that the education is so important, so important.
Do they have stuff for families and friends as well as?
Yeah.
Because I would say, I know when I first came out, I was actually dating a guy, and his mom would throw away bed linens and cups and stuff that we used just because we were gay, and nothing to do with us having anything Her stereotype of gay was just a disease-infested person. We were just disgusting. But I feel like educating family about that is really important too, just because they're your strength to get you through hard times. And if they're saying really hurtful things about something like that, I feel like that could destroy you as well. So I think education on them as well is very important.
Yep. And that's one of the reasons why I like to do what I do, just having conversations like this, is so that way we already know this stuff just in case, you know, or if someone close to us is diagnosed. But the truth is, we can't always plan for that. And so there are support groups all around the country, all around the world, for people specifically who are, you know, friends or family or partners of people who have been diagnosed positive. And I think it's great. And that's something I always say too, is that if somebody is diagnosed with HIV, it's really important to remember that there might be an education component to your support group. So, you know, your friends and your family and your partner, you know, they may not immediately be super supportive, maybe because they don't know anything about it. So it's always good to learn as much as you can. That way, even if you're not diagnosed with HIV, you can share that knowledge with somebody who might need to learn about it.
When it comes to the box that we get in the mail for it, it also comes with like that little pamphlet about PrEP.
Yep.
And you were just talking about how like partners can get it and you don't have it. So how important it is to like be on PrEP if your partner is HIV positive.
Yeah.
And what's the likelihood of like you possibly getting it?
Sure. So for anybody who doesn't know, PrEP is basically a medication that you can take if you're HIV negative to help lower the likelihood of contracting HIV. If taken directed, it can be over 90% effective in preventing HIV contraction. So people say, what? There's a pill that can prevent PrEP? Yes, it's great. Now we pair this pill with other things like getting tested regularly, with using condoms, with talking to our partners. Everything we already said was important. PrEP is another really important part that we can add to our toolbox, if you will, to build a healthy life.
Yeah, it's not a pill that cures it,
Nope.
and it's not a pill that prevents it 100%. So it's not something that you can take and then just be like, okay, I'm safe.
Yeah.
You have to realize that it's just like a condom, like it's not 100% yet.
Right, yeah. So we're not quite there yet. We can't completely eradicate the virus from our body yet, though I'm hoping that one day I won't have a job because that's going to be the case. But yeah, we can't completely pull HIV out of a person's body, and we also can't 100% completely avoid contracting it, except by being abstinent. So if we're sexually active, there is a risk there. But like I said before, a toolbox to build a healthy life. Condoms, testing, communication, PrEP, all super important. If you want more information about PrEP, you can totally find that online. The CDC also has a page for it. So PrEP is really good for people in what we call seasons of risk, which means that if you're young and you want to sit there and sow your wild oats, well, maybe you should consider getting on PrEP. If you're HIV negative and your partner's HIV positive, you should consider getting on PrEP. If you have any number of risk factors that would put you at higher risk for contracting HIV, maybe looking into PrEP is good for you. And PrEP can be found all over the place. Anybody who can prescribe medication can prescribe PrEP. There are just a couple of tests you have to have done beforehand to make sure you're healthy enough to get on the medicine, and then you're good to go. You get a script, and most insurances are covering it. If it doesn't, the manufacturer actually helps cover the cost of the medication. So yeah, it's really great. And if you have questions about it, I would say look into it. And if you don't have questions about it, I would say look into it.
I would say one thing, because I'd heard about PrEP through like Facebook and other people talking about it. One thing I've seen is it's sad, but negative stigma towards people who take it.
Oh yeah.
I've seen lots of people comment on other people's statuses saying the only people who take PrEP are sluts because they're the ones going out having sex with every single person out there, instead of looking at it as a great drug to take to prevent something that could be life-changing for you.
Yep.
People are kind of putting a huge negative stigma on it. What would you say to those type of people?
You're wrong. That's what I would say. You're wrong. You should be ashamed of yourself. No. I understand the reservations, and I understand that people have their preconceived notions of who is going to be on PrEP and why you're going to be on PrEP. But like we already said, all it takes is one time with one partner. And the fact that about at least 1 in 7 people who are infected with HIV don't know it says to me that somebody could think that they're negative because last year when they got tested, they were negative. So they assume that now they're positive. However, they're one of those people that contracted it and didn't show any signs or symptoms. So they're not being malicious, they just simply don't know. Oops. Yep. We just put ourselves at risk simply because we didn't get tested regularly. It didn't mean that I'm a whore because I'm sleeping with somebody. No. Somebody could have recently been tested, and if they just contracted last weekend and now I'm with them this weekend, maybe they're in this period where they're most infectious, which is right after you get infected. So you're more likely to pass the virus immediately after contracting than any other time because your body hasn't been able to fight this virus off. What if it happened then? So I don't have to be a whore, I don't have to be a slut, I just have to care about my health. And if it's not right for you, it's not right for you. That's okay. It's just like, I'm gonna keep talking about that toolbox. When we build a house, we all have our preferred tools that we wanna build this house with. Some people like to use a chisel and, you know, drive all their nails in by hand, and other people wanna pull out the power drill. And we all have different tools in our toolbox to build a healthy life. And if PrEP is in your toolbox, awesome. And if it's not, consider it. And if it's not for you, that's okay. But we all have a different method to stay healthy. And just because you're on PrEP doesn't make you a whore. And just because you're not on PrEP doesn't make you better than anybody. It just means we have a different path of how to stay healthy. And actually what's funny is we were talking about the older people, in healthcare, a lot of older individuals remember back in the day when birth control first started, and everybody was like, the girls don't need birth control, it'll make them a whore. And now all of a sudden we're having that same conversation, decades later with PrEP. And the reality is, studies have shown, if you're already sleeping around in high risk before taking PrEP, you're gonna most likely stay high risk afterwards because it's just a behavioral thing. If you're not having, risky encounters before PrEP, studies have shown you're not going to increase having those risky, encounters afterwards. So it's not this magic pill that's going to turn you into what we call a true bottom whore. Somebody who just goes around with everybody they can because they're on PrEP.
Changes your brain signals.
Yeah, right. It does all kinds of things. I would just say that, the stigma around PrEP, it's got to stop. Just like the stigma around HIV's got to stop. But the only way to do that is to have conversations like this. The fact that you're putting this on YouTube, amazing. The fact that you watching this are now going to leave here and go on CDC and read up on it, or go talk to your friends and read up on it, or find me and follow me on my social media. The fact that you're going to do all of that means that the conversation is spreading and spreading and spreading. And I don't want stigma and the infection to spread nearly as much as I want the message of love and appreciation and education to spread. And the only way that's going to happen is when we talk.
Exactly. So that was a lot of information. I know you guys will probably watch this a few times and still get something new every single time. But Jason actually has his own social medias.
Surprise!
So if you guys want to follow him, he can give you some more information about that. And I'll try to leave some links down below as well that you guys can click on and find him as well.
All the links are going to be below, but in case you're really wanting to do it right now, then you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Snapchat, anywhere that you can look, and all you have to do is search Jason Elliot, E-L-L-I-O-T-T. You can also find me each and every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook Live. You can search hashtag The Jason Elliot Show, and every week we talk about stuff like this and a little bit of anything else too. So that's a good time too.
Awesome. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Please leave some comments in the comment section below. We love to hear what you guys have to say, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.